Hi, I'm Seamless, and this is another How to Bass tutorial. And today I'm going to show you how to take this sound, and then using this plugin, turn it into this sound. Indeed. With also help from this plugin, which is also pretty badass. Both of these plugins are developed by a company called Polyverse, who is sponsoring this video to show you that you can use this to do really badass things. And it's because Manipulator is my clear favorite of the two, but they both do more or less the same genre of what's happening, which is that it's pitch-based control of audio rate manipulation. So anyway, these plugins were developed by Polyverse, sort of in collaboration with Infected Mushroom. They were the ones who did like the testing and sort of they designed the plugin, and by their sorts of specs and stuff is what happened and became these things, which are both kick-ass. Anyway, let's start talking about what it does and how it works. But first, let's talk about what's going on in this Harmor. Yeah. So my solution to the sampling inside Patcher is usually to just put a Harmor in here, and then when you do that, you can go to pitch, and you go to the keyboard mapping and bring low to high and high to low. And what this does is it means that whatever note you press is brought down exactly enough to make sure that every key is C5. And C5 just means play the original sound as well as it can. And the Harmor does a pretty good job of reenacting the original thing if you don't do things like mess around with pitch too much. But of course I did anyway because I'm using unison, but that was on purpose. I can control the pitch change. And not only that, but you kind of don't get the sampled / wavetable problem of how the exact form of characteristics move, particularly with pitch when you're trying to make pitch-based controls of sounds, because that can sometimes like sound a little fakey. To me personally, like I don't think anyone else cares. Like judging entirely by like the state of sound design and popular sound design basis genres, I know no one cares, but to me that's what matters. And like I'm automating the image time knob, and like the speed is also backwards but slower a little bit. And like the parameters I'm messing around, like, and also like the form control, I don't think I'm messing around with image mutation. Nope, this is moving up and down. Like I'm just screwing around with it to give a playing field for what Manipulator can do. And we're going to talk about that right the hell now. But the way we're going to do this is I've got this little dummy manipulator because this manipulator is like kind of extremely entwined with everything that's happening all at once. And in order to explain what each individual thing does, it'd be difficult to kind of unlink it from things in a way that would be sensible. So we're just going to do this sort of from scratch, and I'm just going to sort of explain what each individual parameter does. All right. So now, when you first start off, the MIDI mode is going to be in poly probably, and the detection mode is going to be in mid. And so what this means is that it will either detect the pitch, or its best ability to do so, or it'll accept MIDI. If it detects MIDI input, it'll just accept MIDI. However, if you ever like let go of the MIDI, or if like the MIDI's sort of lead over or whatever, like you'll get a little bit of the original, like the detection audio in there, which sometimes isn't always on point. So I like to use the M gate, which I assume stands for mono gate. I say assume because I haven't read any of the manual for any of that stuff yet, because I'm a lunatic and I like to just sort of dive into stuff without doing that. I know it's poor. I know I advise all of you to do the exact opposite, but come on, man, it's fun. Anyway, when we just play things, even in the offset, we don't really hear any change. And by we don't hear change in me, we hear quite a bit of a change, because now we're hearing its best effort to try and like pitchify the things that are going on. Now, the main deal of Manipulator, its main kind of bread and butter business, is this harmonic knob here. You can kind of hear like what it's doing. It sounds a little bit like a high pass filter when it's up on this side, and then it gets a little bit fuzzy when it goes down here. And I've actually discovered that on like high frequency stuff, the lower levels like sound, it can do some pretty neat things. And it says some things about like what Manipulator's abilities are going to be on things like leads. But up from middle to upwards, it's basically a high pass filter. But like it behaves very strangely, and on top of that, it gets FM'd. So there is an actual literal straight up FM on this thing, and because it's pitch synced through MIDI, it's pitch synced. And so here's how the ratio works. And the ratio is essentially setting what speed the FM is at. And by default, it's at 1, which is to say it's 1-to-1 with the speed. It's going to play whatever note you play. And then you can go lower. So in order to get certain particular kinds of FM effects, if you want to coordinate, say, having your FM at a higher rate, then you're going to want to actually bring the pitch down. Because the pitch control here is actually straight up just like its idea of what pitch is coming in. So you can coordinate your MIDI playing with the pitch setting here to get the right kind of FM you want to have if you're used to doing more advanced FM tactics. The thing is, though, is that this isn't the only pitch-based effect. There's also this forming control, which like is basically what I assume is what's going on in the Iwish forming control, where because it's creating it's cutting off like individual slices. It's basically granulizing the audio, and then it like brings the pitch down to the individual granules, but it keeps it at the right pitch. That means that like it still stays the right note, but essentially everything moves down in the spectrum. That creates a form and shift. I'm not used to this happening live without like a time stretching process. It could also just be a live time stretching process, to be perfectly honest, but I don't know what it is, but it's pitch synced and it's dope. And then it can do a whole bunch of straight up pitch shenanigans, but like beyond the pitch shenanigans is also what the alternator can do. And I was just messing around with the main manipulator. I wanted the dummy manipulator. Dope. The alternator is cool because what it seems to do is that like it bleeds through different pitch modes. So you kind of hear it's like sort of fading through. Like this is up seven semitones, semitones. That's like that. I don't know what I was trying to say. I have a really like now this is pitch syncing based on octaves, so it's going down like so. This is like 2 octaves lower, 4 octaves lower, which is different than how the ratio works because the ratio is cutting in half. So an octave lower, the ratio is 0.5, and then an octave lower than that is 0.25, so on and so forth. And this is just straight up octaves. So like it's just the numbers. It's -1 octave, -2 octaves, and so on and so forth. And when at really low values, you can hear what it's doing when it's just shifting through pitches. Speed it up, and it just solidifies a pitch-based effect. So cool. Now, pitch-based effects in audio array processing of any kind is going to cause a lot of weird noise, and this is where the smear parameter comes in, which is just super cool. And I think the smear parameter is another sort of granular process where it just kind of like bleeds the scanning a little bit. With that at low values, it kind of makes the note a little bit more prevalent versus the process, and it kind of smears a lot of the strange. Like honestly, a lot of the stuff that I spend a lot of time trying to negate with a lot of strange processes, like automating the release times on compressors and EQing it all. To be perfectly honest, because like a lot those effects are created through particular harmonics interacting in particular ways, but this just smears it all away by what I assume to be a granular process. The stereo control is also pretty great. What I was told about this is that it's actually a 3-stage thing where like the bottom is one kind of stereoization, and then the mode in the middle is another kind of stereoization, and then the mode in the top is a whole other kind of stereoization. And they are more as you progress, but they're different, so that you have you have options in terms of how the stereoization is going to go. And that's pretty great because usually a plugin is like a generator plugin, like the synth stuff that has its own built-in effects will be like really stark in their stereoization if there's any kind of built-in version of it. So it's neat that it has like options. There's of course another one, which is the detune option. Straight detune, but like, did you notice what happened when I moved it there just then? Anyone who's used a lot of Serum will hear that and think, okay, that sounds an awful lot like the reverb filter or the combs or the phasers and that kind of the really like phasey screwed up ones. And also what it sounds an awful lot like is what happens when you actually move reverb pitch like that. If you've ever like used a reverb plugin that does real-time pitch change or a delay plugin that does real-time pitch change, and you ever move the pitch change and like the time variable a lot, you'll hear that kind of like sort of pitch change of like the cloud. And what I find particularly neat about this is that like through minimal automation, like, a lot of the tone of the main sound is determined by the automation of this particular parameter, and it's crazy because there is still some actual detuning going on versus what sounds like one of those reverb filters. I'm not totally sure how they're like by what process they're doing that, but the result of it is that like if you move it a little bit, you get this like really nice like whippy phase change, and a couple of times it sounds an awful lot like a lot of like old school noisiest sounds that I liked a lot, and it really never occurred to me that like such a thing could have been accomplished through like maybe unison automation, where like you have like a lot of versions of audio of a sound, and then like your lower, like, you have like low mid high like all the way up, and then like, you automate them closer together, which is kind of what's happening when we're saying that like more detune, less detune. We're automating up a detune and then down. So like this, like listen to what this sounds like with and without it. With and without the actual like chain on. That'd be nice. There we go. So here's me automating it on, and here's it like not coming on at all. It's like taking the exact best part of a phaser without taking all the really stupid parts of a phaser. Like, I don't know if you guys hate phasers as much as I do. I don't really hate phasers, but I hate how they tend to be used like blithely. They tend to be just put on, and then like they're not doing a whole lot with it, and you can just hear the ringy, resonant, just octave locked phaser sound. Sometimes it's really awesome. Like a lot of leads actually are really great with phasers on them, but like in bass sounds, you can hear that, and it's just like a lot of early Harmor demos had that like really stark phaser sound in them. I just like am not a fan, to be perfectly honest. But every once in a while, you get this really great like modulation to it that when partnered with a whole bunch of other crap, it sounds really dope. And it's just that like it's really hard to filter out all the parts that just sound kind of cheesy. And this kind of accomplishes it because it sort of throws it up into the phaser realm and then comes back, so that like it doesn't get stuck in the stupid parts. It doesn't stay long enough for it to get stupid. And that's what I like about like manually automating this. It's pretty awesome. Because you can just be solid if you want to be solid, and then you can also just be a cloud if you want to be a cloud. It's great. And I really cannot believe that this kind of stuff is happening in real time, because it is. This is a post process. Because you remember what this stuff sounds like, right? What the source of this is? Yeah, you do. Ridiculousness. So anyway, in the real manipulator, I have the alternator set up around here, and when you use the alternator, what the range is basically saying is in pitch, essentially like how far in pitch is it going to whip it around, and its middle point is at 1 octave and its high point is 2 octaves. Now at audio rate, what that whipping around sounds like is a little bit like what filter FM sounds like, where you get a kind of these sort of you get poles that show up. You get like little concentrations of where the FM like started and stopped really fast, and then you get a concentration of like the resonance showing up there. And this is a little bit like that, but like it doesn't seem like it's doing a whole lot of like phase change in real time, given that like it doesn't sound like a filter. It sounds like just like crossfading between different streams. Another one I had to imagine is some kind of granular effect. And as a result of that, like it doesn't like whip, it doesn't really wreck your pitch too much, which a lot of like certain kinds of filter FM really do in the real world. But like the lower values kind of shift it, like it's very straight up like darker, lighter, like it's straight up like lower amounts of it to get you like lower physical change. But you can see here that like I have a low, I don't have it completely at like 1, like straight up 0. It's like not the right pitch. It's a little bit reese, and this is how you reese stuff. You make the pitch a little bit different, and so that means that it's doing this, but like it's getting a little bit of phasey off of it. Same thing with the FM, like it's not completely the perfect ratio. I used the formatting just coming down to sound. Am I automating the smear? I am automating the smear. So this one was actually told to me as an idea, saying that like, okay, you should really automate the smear, because like it gets some interesting effects, and it really does, because it's a little bit like when I was originally experimenting with Harmor and with Harmor resampling, that you got this kind of lo-fi watery sound, and you had to wonder like how do you get it to not do that. And the answer to that question is that you use this sort of sharpness control, but like it's not always the best. Like sometimes the watery effect leads to really cool modulation sounds, but like it's like phasing effects. Like it lingers a little too longer than you really want in particular ways. Smearing really is like the most targeted solution to everything I hate about these kinds of processes. And like you have to know that this sort of stuff was designed by someone who does this a lot, because it obviously was a big problem to them too. Just being like, look, man, all these processes are great, but like all I get like 10% cool for every 20% mess, and the smear is like, nah man, you get no mess, nah. And everything is cool. And I have barely done anything neat with this. Like, this is just sort of like the step one, automating the parameters that are here. There's craziness, like the different kinds of modulation, and also straight up like note control and neat modulation for attachments on the stuff that will like make it do really neat things. It's just a lot. And like I'm really excited about this because I really haven't had like a new plugin that I've been excited about in a while, and this one's pretty great. So on top of that, I'm linking it with the other plugin that Polyverse has that I've been working on, which is pretty great, is Iwish. Now what Iwish is a lot simpler, but it's still kind of the same idea, where they're using a granular process to make a big slice of whatever goes into it. And it does really cool things to like voices and stuff, and my original experiments with it when I was beta testing it were mostly on voices. In this case, I'm actually using it as a bit of a sort of like independent manual smear, where I'm crossfading against the straight manipulator with some really stark, solid Iwish. So what you hear, what's interesting about that signal is that what you hear is that you get like a little bit of the tone of the source, but like it sounds like a little bit like the formats are a little high, and like the way that the crossfade's happening is that I have them both going into a fruity balance, it's just a volume knob. And I have in the envelope controller 2 different envelopes and that are just basically the opposites of each other. But they're kind of like whipping around. They're not straight like going up in there like an attack. It's like actually moving around a little bit. And this sort of confusion this creates makes it so that the solidness of the Iwish doesn't actually like completely overshadow like the neat modulation of the manipulator. So we get a little bit of the best of both worlds. And that difference in the format shift, where it's a little bit higher in frequency, that's us a slight like EQing effect, but like in time, which is cool. None of that was intentional. I just kind of did that, and it worked out that way, and I'm able to tell you how that happened in case you decide you want to do it yourself, and you know why it worked. Isn't that great? Anyway, this all goes into a Maximus where it gets compressed like all get out. In this case, I appear not to have used any of the low, mid, or high compression. I'm just straight compressing it like a limiter, single band limiting with pretty generous time settings. I'm basically being very soft to it in this sort of instance. I EQ it a whole lot because then I compress it again by distorting it, because distortion actually is fairly related to compression. It's basically just compression without the time variables. I just mentioned the time variables. EQ it again after that, but this is mostly a high pass because what's happening here is that I'm linking it together with a sub, and the sub that like I use for this stuff is really just like throw in a Harmor and just like get up in your like EQ. Actually, what I'm doing EQ here. I don't know why I did the EQ in post. Oh, you know what? I think it's because nope, I know why I'm doing EQ in post. Be perfectly honest, but I did EQ in post. Oh, because I had different ideas for the sub. I had a whole different patch, but I just abandoned it. So we get this, because normally what I would do is I would just go to local EQ and just turn off the harmonics I don't want, but that be EQ instead. Here's my sub, and this gets linked together with the manipulator into a single low pass filter, which is very, very light. Like the res is like super low, and the point of that is that like because we're going to compress it again, I want there to be a rhythmic sort of focus on the middle and high harmonics and stuff like that, but like I want them still all to be audible. So this is how you get like that like sharp sort of crunchy sound without it being dark in all the cool moments, which are usually in the mids and lows. I am doing something neat with the release here. Like I said before, automating the release time and Maximuses. I don't actually know if it's doing it though, because if you observe the automation, the animation rather, is that it's rather chunky. And I'm not totally sure if that's actually tracking properly or if it's just not telling me it's tracking properly, but it's actually tracking properly. Because let's talk about what the idea is. Because this parameter is linked to the low pass filter inside this one filter over here, and that means that like when it's low, we have well, it's actually reverse linked because I'm linking it to a parameter up here, and here's the X control for that. And you can see here it's inverted. And what this is saying is that when the low pass is low, the release time is high. And what that means is that it's not going to react very fast. It's not going to be very fast compression. And where this is valuable is because when you have low frequency stuff that doesn't have a lot of high frequency material, very slow waveforms, your compression can very easily be faster than the waveform. And that gets you wave shaping, which is just distortion, like I said before. And so to avoid this, what we're doing is saying that, okay, when it's low frequency, it's slow. So it sort of matches that. And when it's high frequency, it's faster, which means it can adapt faster to the faster frequencies that are there more or less in time. And I've done stuff like this before, usually on drums for this exact same purpose though, but it worked. it does do the job. I honestly just cannot tell if it is. And it probably means that the effect I'm going for has no real value in terms of like actually making it sharper or louder or any of that. But I thought it was an interesting attempt. And then I EQ'd it a little bit afterwards. You might notice that some of my like internal EQs are pretty intense and like huge and crazy, but then like my post EQ is like really light and stupid. And I sometimes talk about the idea that like you don't want to cut too hard or you don't want to boost ever as well when you're EQing things. Like in sound design land, nothing about that matters. Like there's a certain amount of like attention you want to pay to your phase relationship, but that's only if you have certain goals you want to keep about like what kinds of sounds you're making. But most of the time though, like it's not that big a deal. However, like if you do have a sound you like and you like how it sounds and you like how it feels, and you really want to be careful with it when it's done, and that's really mixing level stuff. And when you're doing mixing level stuff, you absolutely want to be that kind of careful for that exact reason. Because if you have things that hit sharp, sound sharp, and are good together and whatever, like that might not really be true anymore after you screw around with like the phase relationship. Which what happens when you're using EQs at all? It's a phasing of the frequencies that creates and the boosts or cuts. It's really kind of cool stuff. Anyway, this whole thing was brought to you by Polyverse, which are the company that worked with Effective Mushroom to create this ridiculous plugin Manipulator, which went and took this stupidness and turned it into this badassness. How dope is it? How dope is it? It's pretty freaking dope. And Iwish is neat too. It's got I had to move the pitch down because like the various ideas of what like C0 or C5 mean to these guys were all kind of different. So like it requires a little bit of juggling to get the pitches to work together. But there's really not much to it, which is actually pretty great because it's an extremely straightforward idea and it does have really neat ideas and applications. We'll actually see more about like Iwish by itself because I was really just very excited about Manipulator. That's why this video mostly focused on it. But Iwish definitely is very capable of some pretty extreme stuff too. And we'll definitely see more of that. If you happen to have these plugins, is this plugin out? I don't actually know if it's out or not. It was a beta link. I don't know if it's out. So you know what? I have no idea if this package is going to be available down in the description or not. If it is, yay. If not, we know why. If you have any questions about this, please let me know. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and all that good stuff. And as usual, have a nice day.